It's one of those situations where I told people before, said, look, a group of 8 and then later a group of 6, they aren't going to last forever. They're going to fight amongst themselves. Something is going to happen. We just need to make it to that point. So suddenly when I started hearing the fighting going back and forth, I wanted to jump for joy and say, all right, here we go. I knew it was going to happen if I could just wait long enough. And so I was excited about that point, but I also was trying to avoid getting caught up in the crossfire. I wasn't sure at the beginning exactly what the arguing was about. Suddenly it's Jack and Jackson, but then Christy's involved and Tommy and everyone's involved in this issue, and I'm trying to hash out what's going on, and again, trying to make sure that the anger stays directed at those people shooting at each other as opposed to going after me. And I know sitting in the boat room at one point, we're so stressed out, everyone's panicking, trying to figure out what can I do to survive. And at one point, I just looked up to the camera and just mouthed, I love Big Brother. I love this game, because even though it was such a dramatic and anger-filled and stressful, hour or two, that's what I came into Big Brother for, were events like that, to be a part of it. And then we got a little comic relief when in the middle of all of that, Kat said, look, I just need to tell y'all, Cliff is not really my father. I was like, all right, well, I hope that's not what this is all being argued about. And it turns out it wasn't. But I was excited to see it, but I wasn't sure how it was all going to settle out once they got through with it, too.
Also, you were at the moments that people revealed that they were close with each other. Like, for example, there was Kat and Holly, and not to mention Tommy and Christy. So what was going through your mind when you told all about that?
Oh, it was tough. And I didn't realize that Holly and Kat really knew each other. I knew that they kind of had similar paths and all of that, but it wasn't until after I'd been evicted that I realized that, or learned that they truly were tight and known each other very well. I did know about Christy and Tommy. Tommy revealed it at the end, and right there during that final 5, or right before the final 5 big fiasco occurred, it was difficult. I've always liked to think that we all come in with the same advantages, disadvantages, and we compete on even ground. But looking back at the season, knowing that some of these people knew each other, people will argue whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage. But all I've got to say is I would have loved to have had someone in that house that I knew going in and that I knew I could trust and would watch my back and all of that. So, it certainly threw a few wrinkles in the process, and learning that Tommy and Christy knew each other certainly came into play when making those decisions regarding that Holly versus Tommy eviction decision as well. So it was an interesting twist, whether it was planned as an official twist or not.
Yeah, I was talking to both Tommy and Nicole in both the episodes, in both my respective episodes. First of all, let's start with Tommy. Tommy said that you two were playing very similar games and were trying to get trying to get each other out. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've got huge amounts of respect for Tommy. He loves the game. I know he and his family played their own versions of it, and I think Tommy and I were very similar in a lot of ways in the way we were playing the game. But we also were just never on the same page. As much as my respect is for him, I knew he was targeting me, and there were plenty of times that I was targeting him as well. And it was just because of the respect for what a good strategic type player he was. And he and I both were playing the social game. He had told me, I'd laid out my strategy at one point to him and said, look, Tommy, I'm not coming after you. I would love to work with you at some point in the future. At this point, I'm just waiting for this big group to blow up, and when it does, come find me, and I'd love to try to make something happen. At one point, I thought maybe we were going to have that opportunity when Kat ended up going home, and they kind of blew up this new alliance of 6 that was going to bring in Nicole and myself to work with Tommy. And it just never worked out in the end, but absolute respect for Tommy and the kind of game he plays and played.
Absolutely. And then double eviction nights, you were mentioning that, and then it was probably your two best night. You and Nicole's best night. Nicole winning that HOH for the first time, and then you winning the veto.
Yeah, that was an amazing night. I was so happy for Nicole to see her win. I wanted her to win that HOH so badly. And I know we had people say, "Oh, y'all should have just thrown it. Don't even mess with it. Let Mickey and Holly win, or let Christy and Tommy win. They're probably going to go after each other instead. Y'all will be safe." And maybe that's the case, maybe not. But at that point in time, these different duos we were all pointing fingers at each other. You never knew for certain just who had whose loyalties. And I think Nicole and I at that point both were wanting to build our resumes a little bit as well if we did make it to that final two. And for Nicole to win the HOH portion of it, and then for me to be able to support her and actually win the veto in that same night was just an incredible night. I've got to say that night and my comeback night were the absolute two favorite nights of my entire 93 days in that.
That would be good, but however, I gotta say one of your rougher nights happened during Final Five. We saw Nicole. I was talking about Nicole. She called it, sorry, audience, a clusterfuck of the evening.
Yeah.
Every of the day. She said everybody was fighting with each other on Final Five. That was probably the most intense. We saw clips of Jackson versus Tommy.
Yeah.
And before we went back to watch the HOH part of it, and it was almost like Bailey versus Tyler levels.
Yeah, it was intense. It was stressful. It was a lot of very good players that were all trying to protect their positions and figure out the path forward. And Jackson came in and told us that Tommy had approached him, and of course Tommy was denying it. And Nicole and I went back and forth on that. We didn't necessarily believe Jackson in the beginning, but at the same time, he did have exactly the information that Tommy had just given us. And there were just a lot of factors that came into play. And that entire day was difficult because Nicole and I were basically, we were the decision makers on that particular evening. And we were trying to figure out what could we do to best get the two of us to a final two position. And yeah, it was tough. That was a rough night. Not just because we were ending someone's dreams, but because we all at that point realized that every decision we were making at that point going forward were $500,000 decisions. And so you don't take anything lightly. And Nicole and I were tight. We had agreed before that decision was ever made that we were not going to leave either person hung out to dry. We were going to vote as a team. We were going to make our decision one way or the other, and we were going to vote 2-0 and make it happen that direction. So it was a very interesting evening, Jacob.
Yeah, and I've noticed that you guys with the big fights with Taco Tuesday, the 6 blow up, you guys didn't. And with the Tommy versus Jackson throat screaming match, you guys didn't go into personal mode because the thing is, I definitely can get emotional, and I would have targeted someone's Achilles heel. For example, if I was in the 19 house, I would have gone after Caleb's kid. I would have gone after Cody's daughter. If I was in 20 house, I would have gone after Tyler's father. If it was in 21, I would have mentioned, as Jackson said, I would throw a snide amount about his mom. I would go after. But however, here's the thing. I'm amazed that you guys didn't go that personal level.
Yeah, and I'm glad we didn't. Even more so now that I'm out of the house. I mean, the house is so intense, and you do whatever you can do to get in with the right people, and you try. Yeah, it is a cutthroat position at times, but I did try to continually tell myself that this is no different than a poker game or a Friday night game of Monopoly, that we're playing a game, may the best man win. At the end of it, I didn't want there to be hard feelings. I want everyone to shake hands and say, hey, you did what you could. And so as part of that, I didn't want to necessarily go go with the personal attacks, and for the most part, I felt like we, even though there were yelling matches and there was bullying and there were things that we all have heard about, but at the same time, as much as possible, I think we all tried to keep it game focused and realize that we're all just in here competing for that same prize at the end of the day.
Speaking of prizes, we were a lot of fans, alums, and media commentators were very enraged with Jackson's goodbye message to you. However, at the same time, you still voted for Mickey to win the season. Why did you give him your vote to him after his brutal goodbye message? Because I thought that was uncalled for.
Yeah, it shocked me. After I was evicted, I watched the goodbye message. It's like, geez, do you just not care about jury management at all, Jackson? What is going on here? Because, yeah, I had threatened to poison the jury and had made a lot of – it was kind of my Hail Mary to try to stay in that house over Holly, and I had made some threats, but in no way was that a personal attack on him or his family. It was me trying to play the game and trying to survive in any way possible. I will say this. I did not make the decision on who to vote for until just a few minutes before the vote was cast. As we were hearing them answer questions, as I was sitting up on that stage, I was still going back and forth. But at the end of the day, I am such a huge fan of Big Brother and this game that I wanted to put my personal feelings aside and vote for who I thought played the best game. And yes, jury management is part of the gameplay, but also competitions and social game and strategizing are components of what makes the best player as well. And I don't think anyone will disagree from a competition standpoint that Jackson dominated this season. From a strategy game, he played me. He did several things throughout the season to try to manipulate and make some things happen. And I've got to give credit where credit is due. I also have a feeling he was mad when I made those threats about the jury, and I don't blame him for that. And I have a feeling that he probably made his goodbye message at the height of his anger, and probably would have changed it a little bit later if he'd had another opportunity to do it. But at the end of the day, I decided to put the personal feelings aside. And even though I think Jackson failed at jury management in that particular occasion, he did so well at everything else that I wanted to reward the best player and not just make my vote based on who had offended me or not offended me.
And I think I was talking to Tommy about that, and you guys, it seemed like the jury made the right decision after seeing Paul and Tyler lose. And I still blame, but here's the thing. When it comes to those past decisions, I'm still pissed, and I'm sorry at Davon, at Natalie Negrotti, at Corey, at Paulie, at Zakia, Jason, Cody Nixon, Elena, Mark, and Alex for their votes for robbing Paul the win. But at the same time, I was happy that Bailey, Sam, and Scotty, who Tyler kind of treated badly during their exits, got their revenge and gave the win to Casey. Yeah,
I've always been an advocate that the winner needs to be the person who played the best game, and I get it. After being in that house, I get how easy it would be to not just be a bitter juror. Maybe that's simplifying it too much, but I can understand that no matter how much you try to say it's just a game, there are feelings involved, and it can temper how you feel about individuals. But yeah, I think all of us, for the most part, at the end of the day, said we're going to vote for the person who played the best game, whether we like them or not, whether they personally attacked us or not, and I think that's what we did. And I'm proud of the decision. Now that I know Holly and Kat knew each other, it makes me even that much more supportive of my decision. I'm kind of glad that no one who knew each other going into the game won, because I wouldn't have wanted to see that. But no, I voted for who I thought deserved it, and that happened to be Jackson.
Okay, so we got to talk about America's favorite house guest, because a lot of people voted for you, Nicole, and Tommy to make it to the final three of America's favorite house guests. And What did it mean for you to be in that top 3?
Oh, it was amazing because I went into that house and quickly realized how